the largest political scandal in our republic's history. The use of the most powerful intelligence community in the world to spy against a political campaign and then a new presidential administration. We have 5 in-studio guests today here with us, and we will be opening the first hour with a couple who are legendary. They have been at the forefront of telling the truth about the lies, the distortions, and the crimes committed in America during the Obama administration and the last presidential campaign. And they come from the company diGenova and Toensing. And they happen to be Victoria Toensing and Joe diGenova. The last time we had them in studio, we almost melted our YouTube channel because within a matter of a couple of days, their interview had been downloaded and viewed 250,000 times. We are going to break that record today. Victoria, Joe, welcome back to America First.
Great to be with you.
And I was sorry to leave the green room. We were having such
we were
a
having
good
fun
time.
with our cappuccinos, talking about skullduggery that we now have to share with all of our listeners. First things first, let's just try and set the scene for what we're going to discuss. Am I being hyperbolic when I talk about the magnitude of this political scandal, Joe?
No, you're not. In fact, I think people really have not even begun to realize how big this was and is, because it's still going on. You have the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency and the former director of the Office of National Intelligence still on television spewing political filth and intelligence pornography. This is John Brennan and James Clapper spewing this filth, lies about the President of the United States. Let us remember, they both have accused him of being an agent of the Russian government, a traitor, according to John Brennan. Now, it is inconceivable to me that someone who's headed the largest intelligence agency in the world, or the system of intelligence, as Clapper did, could ever say such things after serving in office. But the truth is, John Brennan is a person who deserves the intense scrutiny of a federal grand jury, and I think he's about to get it. But this is the largest political scandal in the history of our country, but it's more than that. It is a constitutional scandal because all of these people acting together at the Obama Justice Department, FBI, CIA, decided they were going to either prevent a person from being president, or if he got elected and their person lost, Hillary Clinton, then they were going to frame him and make him look like a Russian agent. Nothing gets bigger than that. This is a kind of perfidy and sedition that should never be tolerated.
Perhaps it was best...
Can I ask you, I think you're going to do it anyway because we're having a Vulcan mind meld. If Rip Van Winkle came out of his cave right now, rubbing the rheum from his eyes, how would you describe, in the most succinct way possible, what we're talking about, Victoria?
Oh, well, it's our intelligence and law enforcement weapons were used against an opposite political party. It's as simple and complex.
For political purposes.
Absolutely, for political purposes. I mean, it's used against the opposite political party. I think the AG was about to say, Seb, was that the AG, Bill Barr, summed it up best when he said, I have more questions today than I had before I became Attorney General.
And I think it was the first time, maybe the second time he testified as the Attorney General, when he was asked, are you disturbed by what happened in the FBI? And his response, I think, is the most important part of that testimony. He said, I'm not disturbed by what the FBI did. I'm disturbed by what the intelligence community, meaning writ large, all 17 agencies did. This involves the most powerful arms of government. Let's start to summarize what happened. Where does the story begin, Joe?
Well, we're not quite sure, but it appears to begin very early in the Obama administration when, according to the FISA court itself, illegal
So the
spying.
FISA court is the secret court that was created after Nixon that allows the intelligence services, DOJ, FBI, to spy domestically on U.S. nationals. Sorry, go on.
Yes, they can do that. But it's mostly for foreign nationals, but it's also for Americans if they become involved as an agent of a foreign power. Early on in the Obama administration, there was a political espionage operation developed which involved accessing National Security Agency databases, which included information about Americans.
So this is the huge NSA database that basically is our motherlode of signals intelligence that can intercept practically all forms of electronic communication.
And in fact does, all over the world.
And what was happening at the NSA?
3 contractors who worked for the FBI.
So not government employees,
No,
contractors.
Were accessing databases under what's called Section 702 of the National Security Agency, the FISA Act. And they were sharing that information illegally with third parties. We do not know with whom, but we know it happened because the FISA court on its own issued a stinging ruling in which it rebuked NSA, the FBI, and the senior Justice Department officials of the Obama administration for violating the law. We do not know what happened as a result of that rebuke, but we believe that it is at the heart of what Bill Barr and John Durham are doing right now, because we know that John Brennan began a counterintelligence investigation several years after that spying I just described went on, apparently in January of 2016.
And why, let's explain to those who haven't been involved in national security, why counterintelligence, why not criminal? What's the difference and what's the latitude a CI investigation gives you?
Well, counterintelligence is so wide-ranging. That's why many of us who do this, our kind of work, were appalled when Rod Rosenstein actually appointed Mueller to do a counterintelligence investigation. The regulation for a special counsel talks about when there's criminal conduct afoot. Rosenstein ignored that and had Mueller look into, are you ready for this? Any link, a great legal word, any link between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. That means that Sam Clovis, who was the head of Trump in Iowa, is a farmer. And if he sold corn to Russia, he could have been covered because he was a Trump person.
Because there was a link. Right.
There was a link. It's embarrassing legally that he even said that. So it started out on the wrong legal footing because it didn't have any legal basis. And then, of course, Rosenstein puts in charge a person who's a good friend of James Comey, who is at the center of the whole reason for the independent counsel.
When I joined Breitbart as their national security editor, I was given some very good advice. When you're talking about a story, you have to make sure you have to find out and identify for the readers who the heroes are, who the bad guys are. We have a whole panoply of bad guys. We have very few heroes. One of them is the former director of the NSA, but we have many heroes we will be discussing next with our special guests, Joe diGenova and Victoria Toensing. The topic is Obamagate, the most significant political scandal of our republic. We left the story, and it is a fascinating story, and we have to try and keep our timeline straight. We left the story with the then director of the NSA, Admiral Mike Rogers, finding out that his massive database was being tapped illegally by a handful of contractors who were nominally working for the FBI. What happens at that point? What does Mike Rogers do when he smells a rat, Joe diGenova?
He goes right to the FISA court after he has confirmed the illegal behavior. He doesn't tell anybody in the Justice Department or the Defense Department. And he briefs the chief judge, and she, of course, is flabbergasted by the fact that he's telling her that the people at the top of the Justice Department and the FBI have been lying to her in their false pleadings to the court. As a result of that, she shuts down access to all 702 databases so that no searches can be done until the matter is done. Then the Justice Department, as a result of her being told, finds out and
has to find a plan B, right?
And then they start doing pleadings to the court, which themselves are false. And at that point, Ash Carter, who's the Secretary of Defense, and Clapper, who's the DNI, try to fire Mike Rogers, and it is unsuccessful. And
for uncovering the skullduggery.
one of the things that I can't wait is to hear what Mike Rogers has told John Durham and Bill Barr.
Well, last time you were here, I think you told us that he's willing now to testify or to talk about what he saw,
We
right?
have been told that. I suggest you ask one of your afternoon guests.
Thank you for the hint. Noted,
Yeah.
noted. Okay.
Now let me follow up on what
Yes.
Joe was talking about, because Rogers goes to the FISA court and says all this. And then Rogers, when he sees that there's a really big problem, he cuts off these contractors who should not have had
Anyway.
access
Right,
to
right.
the 702 material. Now, the names of those contractors have been redacted, and if you can find out who they are, oh, go for it. But we do know that he cut them off. That was in April of 2016. Guess when Fusion GPS was hired? Plan B.
Right. So what is Fusion GPS? Let's just walk through this. Fusion GPS is run by a man called Glenn Simpson, an infamous quote-unquote former journalist who has made a speciality out of muckraking, opposition research. And he has been hired to create what? Some quote-unquote dossier with what purpose, Joe?
To discredit Donald Trump, to create any type of information they can to get bad stories written about him, and to, in fact, when they get Christopher Steele on board, to knowingly create a false narrative that he is, in fact, an agent of the Russian government.
And who's Christopher Steele?
Christopher Steele is a former MI6 agent, that's British foreign intelligence, who was hired by Fusion GPS, who has been a contractor for many American people over the years.
With very close ties to Moscow.
He's had
He
huge,
used to be in Moscow.
He used to be stationed in Moscow.
right.
But he hasn't been there in about 10 years.
And so he started to put together anywhere between 14 and 20 memos. It's never been clear to me how many, which were called a dossier. And in it, all of these wild speculative theories were put forth as if they were fact, when in fact we now know that it was disinformation being fed to him by both former Russian associates of his and other people in the media.
Or, and I learned this from Dan Bongino, reheated old stories that had never been confirmed. Glenn Simpson, this is the incredible thing, wrote an article about Paul Manafort accusing of Russian ties, etc., in the Wall Street Journal in 2007.
Yep.
I mean, this is where the arrogance and just combines with the sloppiness. They reheat stories from 9 years ago, and then this is used as a predicate inside DOJ and FBI to do what, Victoria?
Oh, to go after the Trump campaign. And of course, they had to have one other key co-conspirator, the mainstream media.
Yes.
This could never have been done without the Washington Post, the New York Times, and all the networks going after him and every night.
So, and this is what became the collusion, the Russian collusion delusion.
Right. It was made out of whole cloth with no evidence whatsoever.
But then they get a FISA warrant to do what, based on the dossier?
They get a FISA warrant. Now, here's what's interesting. They went to get a FISA warrant on Carter Page without the
Who's
dossier.
working as an unpaid advisor to the Trump campaign, Carter Page.
They went to get a FISA on him, and they were denied by the FISA court.
Which is absolutely exceptional. I think the figure is what, 4-5% of FISA warrants are refused?
Yeah, but those can be misleading. I was in charge of that when I was at the Justice Department.
So tell.
And well, if they're turned down, then they go back and rewrite it and resubmit it, whatever is missing. And this is evidently what they did here.
But what they did was, then they got the Steele dossier, which they knew was completely unverified, according to James Comey, and salacious.
Which he testified to.
Then they went back to the court, and they selectively used it, and they got the warrant on Carter Page, knowing that it was false, knowing that Carter Page and George Papadopoulos had said exculpatory things, which they had on tape.
Right.
The dossier says that Carter Page met with two Igors. I can't remember their last names, but two Igors in Russian who were high muckety-mucks. He never met with them.
Well, don't forget, John Brennan is the man who in 1976 voted for Gus Hall, the Communist Party candidate for president of the United States, and 4 years later, inexplicably, was hired by the CIA, only to become its director under President Obama. We are back with our special guests, Victoria Toensing and Joe diGenova, here on America First. We left the story about the largest scandal in U.S. history with Carter Page, the illegal FISA warrant. what happened? Let's jump forward in history. The Mueller report, the special prosecutor, $30 million, 2,800 subpoenas, 500 warrants, 500 interviews. What happened to Carter Page?
Here's how the Mueller report characterizes Carter. He lived in Russia for 5 years. When he came back to the United States, he became friends with 2 Russian intelligence persons, one of whom was convicted for espionage.
Yes,
Leaving out the Carter Page helped convict the guy, helped indict him, provided the FBI with the information so that they could indict him.
So this is an attempt by one of the, probably, I think you'd have to say special prosecutor is probably the most powerful prosecutor in America, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Special counsel, yeah.
Special counsel is, this is an attempt by a special counsel, in this case Robert Mueller, to smear and besmirch somebody. Because when you say new Russians who were intelligence agents, and then you deliberately leave out and was instrumental in them being caught as intelligence agents. Right. There's only one purpose for that, right, Joe?
Yes, it was to dissemble, to lie to the American people, to smear him. He did the same thing with George Papadopoulos. When you read the report, it makes it look like Papadopoulos approached Joseph Mifsud, when in fact it was Joseph Mifsud who approached Papadopoulos.
Who is Joseph Mifsud?
He is, may I say this one more time? He's a Maltese professor. It sounds like something from a 1930 movie.
Agatha Christie, right? Maltese professor.
But he is a Maltese professor who is a Western intelligence asset who has played the role of an informant and a spy for Western intelligence for years. He is incorrectly described as a Russian asset.
No. They were very, very clever in the way they worded it. They said, who has many contacts in Russia.
Yeah. The bottom line was they were trying to make it look like he wasn't an American asset, when in fact, and Mifsud has now said this through his lawyer to John Solomon, I was an American asset. I've always been an American asset. I've never spied for foreign agencies. I've only spied for the United States. Mueller knew that.
Right.
Mueller knew that, and yet he lied about it and purposely. Actually, it was Andrew Weissman who wrote the report.
Of course.
The thug that they hired. And by the way, Weissman didn't go back to the Department of Justice when the case was over because he couldn't. Because if he had gone back, he would have been the subject of disciplinary investigations for a number of years. Right. So he just went to teach at Columbia or NYU, where the bad people go to die.
So George Papadopoulos, another, I believe, unpaid volunteer advisor to the Trump campaign. Yes. I never met him ever, and clearly somebody on the periphery who met with the future president once, I believe, is honey-trapped, right? Mifsud, Downing, the former Australian foreign minister, these people try to reel in this individual and use his association with the Trump campaign as a pretext for further lying. Is that a fair summary? Absolutely,
and they fed him false information, although Mifsud now says that he never told Papadopoulos that there were emails. He doesn't know where that came from.
The Hillary emails.
But in any event, it's sort of like that game that you play at summer parties when you're a teenager. Somebody whispers something in the beginning, and by the end, it's something different. Because at least by the time the Australian ambassador to England, I forget his name.
Downer,
who was a big contributor to the Clinton Foundation, by the time he told it to the government, our government, he was saying, well, he told me that they had dirt on Hillary and they had emails.
And then there's this one last thing that we will discuss after the break. I've done a lot of work with the FBI. I've trained maybe 5,000-6,000 FBI agents, SOSs, and intelligence analysts, but I've never heard of intelligence agents from the FBI who are researchers, quote unquote is their title, and then they are deployed abroad pseudonymously, as Azra Turk was.
The spy slut.
The spy slut. Thank you, Joe.
Yes, Azra Turk.
The honey trap operative number one. We will continue in a moment with our special guests. Back to our special guests, Victoria Toensing and Joe diGenova. We have to mention my old colleague, I consider him a friend, another hero who has been hard done by, former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, U.S. Army veteran, combat veteran, and that is General Mike Flynn. How does he fit into this story?
Well, it was pretty obvious that as part of the scheme to undo the president, they had to figure out a way to get someone close to him quickly, and that was Michael Flynn. And as a result of leaking to the Washington Post the intercepted communication between him and
which is a crime.
Kislyak.
Which is a crime.
That leak to David Ignatius at the Post was a crime, and it should be part of John Durham's work to find out who did that, and that's really not very hard, quite frankly. But and so they got Flynn, and in fact, he didn't even lie to the agents, even though that's what he pleaded guilty to. The bottom line is this: Flynn was framed. They had to get rid of him, and Sally Yates was a part of that. She's the one who came up, gee, maybe he violated the Logan Act. And then all of a sudden she goes to the White House and starts whining about how he might have been lying to the vice president, and if he's lying to the vice president, he could be compromised by a foreign intelligence service. I mean, it's literally ridiculous.
Sally Yates said that they had to interview Mike Flynn because it could have been a violation of the Logan Act, for which nobody's ever been convicted.
Ever been convicted.
And it's been 200 years since anyone was even
charged.
And
if the Logan Act actually mattered, then John Kerry would be in the dock today.
Yes.
For hanging around with the mullahs in Iran.
He really violated the Logan Act.
Actually, John Kerry has, but it says an unauthorized person cannot negotiate or talk with foreign governments. Well, the future national security...
The designee, the only cabinet-level rank who isn't Senate confirmed, is not allowed to talk to foreign governments?
He's taking a government check at the time. He's on the transition team, for goodness sake. Right. He's supposed to be talking to people from Russia and Mexico and Iran, any place. He's supposed to be doing that.
Facilitating those phone calls. I was a member of his team.
But here is what is interesting. Sally Yates, who should never have been left in her position in the first place, says, well, it was a Logan Act possibility. But James Comey, in his last testimony before the House, said, Logan Act, I don't know anything about the Logan Act. We wanted to interview Michael Flynn but because he lied to the vice president. And some Republican member of the committee said, well, why is that your business? Oh, it's very important to the FBI if somebody is lying to the vice president. And yet, the FBI did not ask one question about a false statement to Pence.
And what about the way that General Flynn was approached by the FBI?
Oh, it was disgraceful.
He was told by, was it Stroke or McCabe?
One of
it was one of
it
the
doesn't
two.
matter. Hey, they're going to come by and see you.
We're going to come by. We're going to send some guys to come and talk to you.
Which he did every day.
Right. And he said, you don't need counsel there.
Right.
And Mike Flynn, as a good patriot, a good soldier, went to that meeting with trusting his fellow colleagues in government, and he was finally charged with what? A process crime, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
False statement to the FBI, which the agent who read the thing said, we don't think he dissembled. And then the reports, the 302s, were held up for months by Strzok and
8
McCabe,
months.
and those reports were later changed. And we don't know the process by which that occurred. And that's being investigated.
Now let's talk about his status. So he's been charged, he's been convicted of this process crime.
He pleaded guilty to the process crime.
To protect his family, to stop the proceedings that would cost him his home. But twice already, the sentencing has been postponed. What's going on there, do you think?
So we don't know. There's just
could it be good news perhaps for Mike Flynn?
The judge was weird.
He was
quite
the
bizarre.
Statements he made were weird.
Very weird. And we came upon a taping of Rachel Maddow, who babbled the same thing the night before that Judge Sullivan babbled in court the next day.
It's almost verbatim. It's almost verbatim. It's like he was watching Rachel Maddow and then sort of streamed her into the courtroom that next morning.
So a federal judge was channeling the chief propagator of the Russia collusion delusion in court.
And remember this. This is a federal judge. He accuses Michael Flynn in this status hearing. It's no big deal of being a traitor. He says, you committed treason. You may have committed treason.
And then what happens a few hours later?
And then he changes everything. He took a break. I don't know whether he was getting meds or something or whatever it was. But that performance by Judge Sullivan was truly disgraceful.
But he peddled it back. I mean, have you ever heard of a judge saying somebody did something treasonous at 11 a.m. and at 2 p.m. saying, sorry, I made a mistake?
I've never heard a judge accuse somebody of treason. That's a very big deal, and it's illegal.
It was unacceptable behavior by a federal judge.
People have been executed for it in the past.
It was unacceptable behavior by a federal judge. And by the way, it threw into question his impartiality with regard to General Flynn. I just hope eventually he will be pardoned along with a number of other people who deserve it.
So you expect that the sentence will happen and it won't be good news, but
who knows?
You are praying for a pardon?
Scooter
Libby scenario?
My client.
That's why I mentioned it.
There is no way that...
Same people, by the way. You know that.
No.
Oh yeah, Comey. Comey
Wow.
was the one who had.
Comey went after Scooter with
True conspiracy.
And do you know what his lawyers were told all the time? Give us something on Cheney, and this will go away.
this will all go
I
away.
think, isn't that what Corsi was told? Give us, manufacture something against the president, and we'll make this all go away.
Oh, let me tell you something else.
Can you hold it? Can you
I
hold
don't
it for the
know.
next break? Hold it. All right, please do not forget. Write it down. We need to know, Victoria. I'm Sebastian Gorka. This is America First. We left it with Scooter Libby and now Paul Manafort.
Yes, because I had told you that there was pressure from the special counsel to just give up Cheney and this will go away. For Paul Manafort, Andrew Weissman and Bob Mueller put him in solitary confinement, and 9 times, because we got this from his lawyer, 9 times brought him out of solitary confinement and said, so tell us that Trump knew about the Trump Tower meeting before the meeting, which would be no big legal deal
The one
anyway,
with
but they were trying to make that Trump
with the
Tower
Russian
meeting with
lawyer.
the Russian lawyer a crime. They were trying to make that a crime.
So 9 times they lent on him.
And then pushed him back into solitary confinement. It is outrageous.
Do we do this in America, Joe? I thought this is what we do in countries like Venezuela or the Soviet Union.
Well, Bob Mueller and Andrew Weissman are a disgrace to the legal profession, an embarrassment to the Department of Justice, and I'm so disgusted by the way they behaved as federal prosecutors. It's an embarrassment to those of us who have worn that badge with honor as federal prosecutors.
Right.
And during his testimony, Bob Mueller said, I'm not familiar with Fusion GPS.
Yeah, we have that audio. I have to ask you one question that I know you are asked all the time as you travel the country. I am asked it as well. We have 2 minutes left. Are people going to go to prison? Is justice going to be served? Do you have faith in Bill Barr?
I have total faith in Bill Barr. I have total faith in John Durham. I want a thorough professional investigation, which we didn't get from Bob Mueller.
Right.
If some people are indicted, I will be happy. But I also want all the facts to come out so we know what John Brennan did, what Comey did. But here's the rim. January the 5th, 2017, President Obama had all those people in his office. They discussed the counterintelligence operation. This was all authorized by Obama. It was all done with his knowledge.
We've seen the texts.
And
the
so
White House wants to know everything.
the bottom line is this was an Obama spying
This is
operation, and he's
Obamagate.
never going to be able to get away from
I
it.
need to ask your partner. Are people
well,
going
I
to go to
think
jail?
I
Are we
want-
going to see justice? Victoria Toensing?
Because I also have complete faith in Bill Barr. I think that it will. I assume that they will never indict a former president, but that other people's heads could roll.
With jail time?
I pray.
Who knows? We hope.
But
They're
you know
deserving
what?
of it.
They're going to have to hire lawyers.
They're being rather mouthy for people who are in legal jeopardy. And I love watching every single tweet from that high school whiny little girl, Jim Comey, and all the further incrimination, self-incrimination from John Brennan.